Good morning, my beauties. How are you all doing out there in the world? We are coming at you from a rather chilly England today. Wherever you are listening from, I want to say thank you very, very much. And today I have a lovely guest on with me. This is Clare Robinson. Hi, Clare.
Hi.
Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us today. So today we've got Clare on with us. She is a doula and hypnobirthing teacher who last year in July took the very, very deep plunge, as we know as self-employed people, into self-employment and freelance work, where she felt that the universe had given her a much larger calling to go and help other people. So, as always, with my guest, I'm going to pass you over to Clare, because she can explain this just way better than I can. So, Clare, take it away.
Well, I hope I can explain it well. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on this morning. It's lovely to be here. But yeah, I'm Claire. My business is called Your Birth and Beyond, which, as I'm sure the name suggests, my work is all around supporting people with preparing for their birth, supporting them through that, and that period beyond. In particular, that focus on that sort of first 12 weeks post-birth, that fourth trimester, and it's such a pivotal time in people's lives as they adapt to becoming a new parent. So that's where my work focuses on. So as you said, Bex, I'm a doula, which, just in case anyone isn't 100% sure on what that is, a doula, essentially I support pregnant women and pregnant people to prepare for their birth. Whether that be thinking about their birth plan, thinking about their preferences, helping them maybe sort of express and go through any previous trauma that they may have around previous births, any sort of anxieties that they have around birth. We can work through that together, and I can be that continuity of care and support for them. And then I provide support during birth. So a doula is a trained birth professional, but a non-medical professional. So I'm not there to give medical advice or support, but to give valuable support, whether it be helping to advocate for the birthing person and their wishes and preferences when dealing with medical professionals such as midwives and doctors, whether it be providing comfort measures to them, whether it just be through sort of verbal support and being that safe space and that safe presence with them during that period. And then I also support a lot of clients postnatally as well. And again, it's about being that safe space. It's about people feeling held, people feeling safe and supported during that time, which is a very anxious time. For anyone that's had children, they will remember it. It's a time where we're thrown in the deep end, whether it's your first baby or your fourth baby. You know, every experience is so different. There's all sorts of emotions. There's a lot going on, and so to have someone who is there, not necessarily to come in and care for the baby, although I may take care of the baby whilst the parent perhaps takes a rest, has a shower, gets to do something for themselves, but it's more about actually being that support for the new parents and actually taking care of them. So whether that's helping them with their nutrition, helping them with the emotions that they're experiencing, helping signpost them to great information about different aspects of parenting that they may be struggling with, making decisions around. So it's very much, I always say to my clients, I'm not here to advise and I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm always happy to share my experience, and I will signpost you to places where you can find out great information, and I will work through that with you and help you make the right decision for yourself, because it's all about empowering people to find what is right for them. So that sort of sums up a little bit of what I do as a doula. I also teach hypnobirthing, so virtually, in person, one-on-one with couples, or within group classes, and work through a program. The method that I use is KG hypnobirthing, so it is a method of hypnobirthing developed by a lady called Catherine Graves, who is huge in the birth space, and we work through a really comprehensive course that's sort of a complete birth preparation, a complete antenatal education that helps prepare people for birth, and in particular giving them the knowledge in how they can have a physiological birth, if that's the right path for them and the direction that they want to take. So it's helping to empower people with information that you don't really get anywhere else, and you don't get in this sort of traditional paths of going to a midwife appointment or going to sort of the regular antenatal classes that, you know, are run. It's about giving, a lot more information than you would get from those places so that you can be really empowered. So yes, that's a bit about what.
You when I had my babies, like, oh my God. Honestly, listen to that description. Like, I think I really could have done with you on both of my births. Seriously, like,
Yeah,
I didn't have a midwife at all on my first one. It's not a thing in Cyprus. There aren't midwives.
yeah,
Um, and here I did have one for my second birth, and she was amazing. Like, my hat goes off to her. I love her to bits. She was
yeah,
wonderful. But the description you have just given, just like that sounds, I really could have done with you. Like, seriously, like all that support, that kind of that guidance without pushing an opinion. I love that. Like, I'm just going to guide you on this path and help you make your decision your way. Oh my
yeah,
God. Like, honestly, just listening to you, I was like feeling such relief, almost as if I'd never go through it again. But, you know, like, if I was to, never, but if I was to,
yeah.
oh my
And
God,
this,
it's awesome.
yeah, and this is the thing, I think, particularly I mean, I can only speak for maternity services in the UK, and obviously you've experienced having a birth in two different parts of the world. And it's, you know, it varies massively, but certainly the maternity system in the UK, you know, it's very much a conveyor belt of
Yeah,
services, as so much of our healthcare is. And it's kind of a one size fits all approach. And of course, birth isn't like that. We are not like that as individuals. So it's about being able to provide that really individualized care. And yes, you know, a doula can't medically advise, but the whole sort of principle behind what I do, and particularly around the hypnobirthing, is that birth has become a very medical event. It's become very medicalised in the UK, as in many other parts of the world as well. I mean, some other parts of the world even more so than here. And it's become a medical event. It's become medicalised. We feel we need doctors, we need midwives, if they exist in that country, who are still medical professionals. And actually, it's about coming back and saying, well, actually, birth is a natural event, it's a physiological event that occasionally will need to be medical because, of course, of things that can go wrong. But actually, most of the time, it should be a natural physiological process. Of course, you know, for the many thousands of years we've existed as humans, that's how it's been. And it's not that just that birth has just sort of stopped working in the more recent years. Actually, we need to kind of go back to, well, how did we birth? You know, how have we survived as a human race to get to this point without all these interventions and without all of this sort of medical
development.
drama around birth, which actually, of course, sometimes there will be need. And thank goodness we have life-saving medical procedures. Thank goodness we have doctors and hospitals, and we are able to access that life-saving treatment in birth if we need it, as in all other aspects of our health. But actually, most of the time, if we don't, big caveat, if we don't meddle with the physiological process, most of the time birth can be, and very successfully can be, a very natural physiological event. And that's something I'm really passionate about. I learned through my own experience of wildly different births like yourself. You know, first birth, just knew nothing, totally gave full trust in medical professionals, chose to have a completely medicalised birth because I felt to have, you know, that controlled situation would be the right thing, and found the experience very traumatic, found bonding with my baby very difficult, and, you know, all sorts of problems that came as a result of that. When I then discovered in my subsequent pregnancy and my subsequent birth experience this other way, I felt so passionate about everyone should birth like this if they can. And yeah, and now that's what really drives me in my work, now that I am working in this space, to really help people to understand that it's possible, and to understand how they can achieve it if that's something that they want to do, and to really empower people with the knowledge that they need to be able to go and do that.
And I think that personal experience for you, it always helps. If you are passionate about providing a service for people and giving your love and your talent and your capabilities and your skills to someone, having that experience and experienced it yourself drives that passion, because you know 100% how you felt and you want to pass that on. And I absolutely love that. I love that passion behind it, because
Yeah.
birthing and pregnancy, it's a hell of an experience, isn't it? You know, like, no matter what, even when it does go wrong, even when it is traumatic, even when it
Mm,
is the most beautiful, easy birth in the world or the longest labor, no matter what, it is a hell of an experience that we go through, that we carry for the rest of our lives, no matter how it went.
mm, mm,
And I agree with you. You said the word intervention and you said meddling. And those
mm,
two words just like stuck out like a sore thumb. And the truth is the more anything medical, the more you intervene, the more you meddle with that. You need more intervention next time, right? Antibiotics, perfect example, right? The more you
absolutely.
take, the stronger they've got to get because it's not working anymore. And I agree with you. Yes, you need medical advice sometimes, and you need medical intervention sometimes. Sometimes you need outright surgery and emergency, this, that, and the others with birth. But that's not everybody.
Yeah,
That is not every birth. And I don't
absolutely.
know what the percentage would be, but I would say it would be quite a high percentage that doesn't require that at all.
Mm,
And
mm.
the women that have them in the back of cars can attest that they don't really need an awful lot,
Yeah.
not even space. Who's going to have them?
Exactly that. And I think, when we look at the sort of the evidence, the statistics that we have around birth, in the UK, so every NHS trust will produce, usually monthly, their kind of stats for the month of, how many births there were, how many vaginal births, how many cesarean births, how many births that were assisted, how many happened on the labour ward, how many happened at home, and so on. And they'll produce these, and the the statistics show us that the vast majority of births are not natural physiological births. The vast majority are either cesarean section or an assisted delivery. Um, it's a much smaller percentage who are having a quote unquote natural birth, because then within that we know there's been a lot of other things that potentially have meddled along with that process as well, and complications that can arise as a result of that. So the evidence is there that absolutely it's no longer the norm. It's actually now very unusual to just get on with birth and do it physiologically. And I think because of that, there is this sort of cultural expectation that, well, it must be really risky then. Well, if all these people end up needing this cesarean, well, then you need to be in the hospital. So you've got the doctor right there and you're right by the surgery. And it's actually about taking this huge step back and learning more and more about the physiology of birth, understanding more about our bodies. So when I was pregnant, and actually did, because I decided I didn't want the same birth experiences again, and I wanted to work around this trauma. And I think, similar to you, Bex, we talked earlier about that you sort of sought hypnobirthing yourself for your second birth because of that trauma that you'd experienced previously. And I think a lot of people do come to hypnobirthing from that space. So I came with this kind of, okay, I want to find something alternative. I want something that's going to help me prepare better this time. And just discovered so much about my body and the ability that my body, had, that I had no idea of. And the majority of people don't know, because the majority of people that come to my classes will say, I had no idea. the people, just friends of mine that I will chat with, whether they've been pregnant before or not, whether they've had babies or not, will be just completely blown away by some of the things that I'll tell them. Well, did you know this, that, and the other? So we need to have that knowledge in order to then know that actually the reason that all these births are going wrong, and the reason that we're finding out, oh, well, something like 55-60% of the births in the hospital that I'm going to last month were, either assisted deliveries, like forceps being used to pull the baby out, or they were a surgical, a cesarean section. And well, why is that? That's because we're not getting the environment right for birth. We're not equipped with the knowledge that we need for birth. And because we don't have that, we're not trusting in the process. So, and that's where that over use of intervention comes in, and that kind of meddling with the process. There's a really lovely quote, and I cannot quote where it comes from, but it's something I've read continuously, which is that, as humans, we are the only mammals that doubt our ability to give birth. And actually,
a really fascinating quote, that
yeah.
is.
And I always talk about this in my birth preparation classes, because I say, we think we're the smart ones, but actually we're the only ones that fear it, and we're the only ones that doubt that we can do it. Because, of course, with that doubt then plants those seeds of fear. And it's so actually what I always say, and, it might sound ridiculous to some, but actually some things we can really learn about birth, and this is actually an activity we always do in the first week of my birth prep class, is we talk about how other mammals give birth. And so if we think about, where you might have seen on TV, I can remember a sort of show about a vet before that showed, cows giving birth in a barn, or if we think about if we've ever had a dog or cat, give birth to their puppies, their kittens, we think about those typical things that happen in those births, and usually those births are, vast majority of the time, straightforward. Of course, sometimes there can be complexities, but vast majority of the time straightforward. The mother animal, makes a very quick recovery afterwards. The babies are absolutely, vast majority of the time, absolutely fine. They instantly feed after birth. Things are quite smooth in the animal world compared to what we know as humans. How we're having all these problems with feeding our babies and establishing that, and we're having problems with giving birth to them, and we're having all these anxieties and worries, and we're having to be in hospitals and having doctors and surgeries. And so, well, why is it? And so we talk a lot about that, and a lot of that comes down to the environment in which we birth in. And ultimately, a lot of it comes down to the fact that, our cats, our dogs, farm animals are not fearing birth because they haven't had that cultural narrative telling them that they got to go into a hospital to do it, that it will be really painful, that it will be really hard, that it often goes wrong, that it's something to be scared of. And that's what we are culturally trained to do from probably as young as we can remember, because it's all we see on TV and in the movies.
Of course, the woman screaming,
Screaming, sweating in a hospital. It's a dire emergency. We must get her in an ambulance if she, goes into labour suddenly. And it's this whole concept that it's this really terrifying thing. And actually, I think, even if you speak to very young children, most of them will already start to have those associations around what birth is. And because of that, our brains essentially get in the way of what our bodies can do. And there is so much, that's such a nuanced topic, and hence why my birth preparation course is a 12-hour course, because there's so much for us to delve into, and there's so much for us to discover and learn and talk about. But ultimately the reason that, cats have a much better birthing experience to humans overall is because their brains are not getting in the way of their bodies. They're letting their body do what it's made to do, and they're getting on and birthing. And there's no reason why we can't do the same.
It's just a very natural process to them. They get comfortable.
Private space.
Little space. They make sure it's kind of warm and cozy. Whether that is in a barn and it's straw because that suits the cow, or whether it's and again, there's nothing against hospital beds. They are sterile, clean, hygienic places. But
Yeah.
in that sterility, it leaves you with that feeling as well. There is no comfort to it. There is no charm or anything else. And although you can take some bits and bobs in for a birth and so on, I was originally planning to have a natural birth. I actually fought for it. So when I was in Cyprus, I was given no choice whatsoever. They absolutely went hell for leather and napped everything up. And then this one, I've really advocated for myself, and my husband was right behind me. I even had my mother-in-law come in and advocate for me as well. That's why I said, "Where were you?" Doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and we advocated and really forced them to say, no, it will be a natural birth. I understand you're telling me that one C-section means really I should have a second. I understand you're giving me statistics, but I want a natural birth. But the truth is I planned all of that, as you do. I planned to have a comfy pillow and a blanket and some fake candles, the little battery
Yes.
operated ones, and some
Yeah.
lovely smells and scents and so on. And then I got whipped into a planned, scheduled C-section, and none of that could exist. I was
Mm-hmm.
back into a sterile bed waiting for my name to be called to go down into surgery. And
Yeah.
although it was 90,000 times better than the first experience I had as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, it was still a sterile experience. And it
Yeah.
lost all that comfort, all
Yeah.
that natural feeling that it should have to it. And
Yeah.
again, I reiterate here, I cannot fault my second birth. I know how I would have wanted it to have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is kind of more what I'm saying, because I can't fault it after you've had a horrendous one in a different country. I
Yes.
can't really say much about you.
Yeah.
You weren't that bad, but I agree with you. I think that we are forgetting how um, everything that we do, everything about our bodies, everything about what we ingest and what we put into our brains, what we filter through ourselves. This is not new. This is the new. All of that's the new stuff. We should go back to the old way where we didn't
Yeah.
need.
Exactly. Is actually the new way. We've got to go back to sort of the old way of birthing. And I think there's a whole piece to say around healthcare in general, actually. We need to take a step back and go back to some of the more traditional forms of medicine, of, traditional methods to support our well-being. And this is the thing, I think, that a lot of people hear terms like hypnobirthing, and it feels to some like it's all very new, and it's a bit, and we hear terms like new age and and alternative alternative therapies, don't we, or alternative medicine or alternative practices, such as like Reiki that you practice, is regarded by many and
Predates
often
everything.
told. Exactly. But actually, it's a very ancient
Very
practice,
ancient.
rooted in something very powerful that we've totally forgotten about and moved away from.
Yeah.
And so, we get all of this sort of pushback of, that this is something very alternative and
It's
odd
misconception, isn't it?
and
People are misconceiving
unusual,
it.
when actually it's like, no, it's about actually just going back to the way we've birthed for thousands of
Yeah.
years, going back to doing what our bodies can naturally do on their own, because that's how they've been designed. Um, and I think that, yeah, there's such a huge lesson to be learned by kind of taking a step back sometimes, isn't there, and thinking, how have we got to where we are today? Like, just like the example you made earlier about, the overuse of antibiotics, yes, of course, antibiotics, I'm not saying let's do away with them altogether, they can be life-saving things, and we know, of course, historically, in previous times, in previous eras in history, that people would have died over things that we can now very easily treat. And of course,
So
that is
lucky to
amazing.
have them, but
Yeah,
no, you don't need
but
them
we
to every day.
overuse them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that feeling of actually, we've totally lost skills and knowledge that we previously had. I read a really interesting article recently, and it was talking kind of about herbal medicine. And that, that it's considered a really like new practice to think about how you can use herbs to treat different symptoms and ailments. And actually we're hearing more and more that there's certain health conditions that actually people are only finding the answer because the doctors will say there's nothing we can do. They are finding the answer through herbal remedies as one of many examples of different therapies that are out there. And it's like, well, actually let's go back to when herbs were all we had. All we had was that medicine, and actually that's nature's medicine that have those properties for a purpose, for a reason, and it's like we've forgotten about all of it.
I'm now sat there going,
Yeah,
new,
yeah,
new. We're talking about new. We've been
yeah.
doing this for 5,000 years.
So I think it's it's just so important, isn't it, to kind of question everything and to sort of, realize that we're living in a world where we're meddling too much with our bodies.
Yeah.
We're creating problems for ourselves because of the way that we're living. And it's causing us all manner of problems, mentally and physically, with our health. And birth is one example of many of where we're just really getting it wrong. And if we can try and step back into how it worked for many thousands of years, let's try to get ourselves back to some of that.
So as a doula, would you go anywhere? So obviously immediately it conjures up an image of you kind of in their home or like a water birth at home. But I take it that being part of that experience, if that requires medical intervention, you're there with them too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a common misconception, that you can only have a doula if you are fully committed that, oh, I'm going to birth at home in a pool by candlelight, and no, that doesn't have to be the case. The last birth that I supported actually did end in a cesarean section in the hospital. The birth, I was there with them throughout, in the hospital environment. The hope was and the plan was that it was going to be a vaginal birth, but in a hospital environment, as sort of natural and physiological as possible. Due to a number of factors, ended up being a cesarean birth. But absolutely, I was there to really support them through that, to support them through as the course of birth changes. And particularly for the birthing person, it's an exhausting journey physically. Your body is doing something incredible and doing something that is very, very exhausting. So to be there to provide comfort, to provide support, but then to be able to be that neutral voice in the room of, okay, these are the choices now that you've got before you, because perhaps the path isn't quite going in the direction that you'd initially hoped for, and to really help empower them in understanding that, with the exception of dire medical emergencies where it's an absolute matter of instant, we've got to do something because of life or death, which fortunately this was not, and in the vast majority of cases it never is with birth. It was about helping them see that they were still empowered, even though birth might not be going down plan A, but actually there are still things in your control, choices to be made, and really helping to talk them through that, because the medical professionals in the hospital neither have the time to be able to do that or necessarily the knowledge or willingness to do so. They are, and this is not to bash, midwives and doctors, and there are many wonderful ones, but they are bound by protocols. They are bound by, well, this is how we do things. And actually, for some of them, they're so entrenched in that actually their knowledge of alternatives is very limited. And others feel very caught between, I know what I have to do and what I can get into trouble if I don't go down this particular path, and which is why we're seeing midwives leave in droves, and there's a huge shortage of midwives, and there's always staffing shortages, which is why they're being pulled from pillar to post. And actually your chances in the UK within the NHS of having that sort of continuity of care from a midwife, it is limited, because they're not going to be able to be at your side the whole time. They have so much, there's so much protocol around what they do. You know, there's so many things they have to record. There's so many things that they have to do that take them away from being with the birthing person and being that kind of safety and support net. So it's, yeah, the role of a doula is then very different to that of the midwife. Being there as a doula means the midwife can get on and do their job, and the doula can be that source of the care and the comfort and the support. And actually, my experience as a doula is actually midwives generally are very, very thankful and grateful when a person or a couple have a doula, because they almost feel like, I feel quite happy then going away and doing all the things I have to do. And knowing that they're okay. And actually, in an awful lot of the births that I support and that doulas will support in hospital environments, is that actually the midwife isn't present very much, but as the doula, yeah, you remain at the side of that person throughout the whole time, and you know, for as long as they need and want you to be there. So it's, yeah, it's absolutely, it's, I think, such a vital role, and we know, you know, there is a lot of evidence around the use of doulas and how they support better, more positive birth outcomes, and I do believe it's because it's ultimately what we all need, but of course, sadly, it's not something that is freely available to people, and it's also something that a lot of people don't know about. So actually, even if they could afford to have a doula, or they had means of being able to access doula support, they might not even know that it exists. So
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. And yet again, there can be great misconception. Big
yeah,
word for today, misconception. We're using that one
yeah,
quite a lot. There is a big misconception between a doula and a midwife.
yes,
I know a lot of people that believe that they're the same thing,
yeah,
and I think that your description is actually is very good. You know, one is considered a medical professional, one is not.
yeah,
One is supportive, one is actually working on protocol, one is there to sort of care and guide, when the other one is there purely for a purpose. And there's nothing wrong with that purpose at all. Again, not
mm-mm-mm.
midwife bashing, but they are, you're right, they are so governed by their protocols, their schedules, their paperwork, their
Yeah,
health and safety, their guidance, and everything that they're given. But really, I can see why people would actually quit, because they don't probably feel that they're doing the job that they were there to do or trained to do. You know, I wanted to
exactly
finish
that.
up
Yeah,
meetings and I'm actually not. I'm filling in loads of paperwork. You know,
yeah,
like it's just.
exactly that.
But there is a huge misunderstanding that you are both the same thing, and
Mm,
clearly there is a very big difference.
big difference, yeah. And also that, as your initial question, which yeah, led me down this tangent of talking about doula support, but where we talked about, you know, what sort of birth would a doula attend, and that's why, you know,
Yeah,
doulas are there for all births. That, you know, there might be people that say, well, I'm birthing in a hospital, so I don't need one, or well, I'm, you know, planning to have an epidural, so I don't need one, or, you know, whatever it might be, from a highly medicalised birth to you know, a complete free birth where the person is at home with no medical support or intervention whatsoever. Doulas can be in any of that full spectrum of births and can be a valuable asset to that person's birth experience. So yes, it's a really important role, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's a great privilege to have this role. I never take for granted, you know, what a privilege it is to be able to support people in that most vulnerable time. I mean, you'll know from your own experiences of birthing. I remember that was the thing that struck me so much in my own experience of birth, was how vulnerable you feel. And I think, yeah, to be able to be with someone in that space, and hopefully provide some sort of safety and comfort for them is, yeah, it's an immense privilege, and it's something that, you know, I wish everybody could have.
great importance, because I know that you've kind of got your backup team, and you know you've got your birthing team, which will probably be, you know, partner or
Mm,
parent or friend or sister or whatever. But it's a little bit different when it's um like an educated support, if that makes sense. So someone that's actually studied all
yeah,
aspects of this. You know,
exactly.
all family and friend can be supportive and caring and loving. They can run and get you a nice cold towel or whatever it is that you might need at that
Yeah,
moment, or put your music on. But yes, there is a great difference between that sort of support and what a doula offers. And to be fair, I thought I knew quite a bit about doulas, not a huge amount, but I knew
Mm.
that you were not the same as a midwife.
Yeah.
But you've definitely sort of opened my eyes on a lot of things that I didn't know a doula was, kind of thing. So hopefully out there, you've really sort of inspired people, and then definitely let them know what it is that you guys do and what the
Yeah.
importance of what it is that you do. So that brings me to another question, and I will forget it if I don't ask.
Yeah.
But I'm
Go
hanging
for it.
on to it for a little while now. So I think, again, let's go with misconception. People would assume that you would have to be a little bit like me, a bit holistic, a bit spiritual, a bit witchy woo, a little bit wafty, and so on, and have your crystals and so on and so forth. And to be fair, I know that doesn't actually matter in the slightest, because you can be that or not be that. But
Yeah.
as a doula, you know, I think people would probably assume that they would have to be somewhere in that vicinity, alternative, complementary therapy, kind of new age vibe. And I don't believe that as a person that would want a doula, you'd have to be, would you?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I think that's such a common misconception. And actually, just the other day, I saw an Instagram post by a doula who was talking about, what she's not as a person. And one of the things that she put, which actually absolutely had me laughing so hard, was she said, I'm not the type of person that bases my decisions on the state of the moon, on whether we're in a full moon or not, and she meant it, with the nicest of intentions, that, to not bash people that do that. And I certainly, am very, and becoming all the time more open-minded to more spiritual way of life. That absolutely, there are many doulas, there are many hypnobirthing practitioners, there are many birth workers in this space that wouldn't know the slightest thing about the moon and its significance, or have any interest in crystals, or any of the woo woo things, and absolutely no, because it's all about science. It's all about looking at evidence-based information, logic and science, when it comes to supporting physiological birth. So you could have somebody who, is incredibly logical, factual person, may have no experience, knowledge, or desire to know anything about the more alternative or spiritual world, and they can still absolutely gain enormous support from, working with a doula. They can absolutely gain a huge amount of knowledge from doing a hypnobirthing course, particularly if it's, it needs to be a thorough, high quality one, because there's a big variation out there. It's a term that's being branded about quite loosely now, but certainly the KG hypnobirthing course that I teach, what I always start with saying at the beginning is that skepticism is really welcome. If you're sitting here as a skeptic, either you're the pregnant person or you're the partner, and you're sitting here and you're really skeptical about this, and you are worried that I'm going to make you meditate, or that we're going to, a couple of dads often will say, like, are we going to be doing some yoga during this? Like, no, we're not going to be doing any of those things. Now, all of those practices are wonderful. So if you are already, really into yoga, amazing. If you're really into breath work, fantastic. If you are, an avid, I have a huge crystal collection, and I believe in the energetic properties of crystals and how they can support me in birth, that is wonderful. All of those tools are going to help you immensely. But if none of those things are your thing, you're going to still gain a lot from this course. And actually, my course doesn't go down into any of those paths, although, of course, as a doula, with that personal relationship I might develop with clients, we may explore those different elements depending on the client's preferences and interests and where they're coming from. So yeah, it's absolutely, what I always say at the beginning of the KG Hypnobirthing course is that, skepticism's welcome. Please bring your questions, your sort of concerns, to the door. If something feels like it doesn't make sense to you, raise it. What I do always say, though, is that please ask that you take that same level of skepticism into your medical appointments as well, and with your medical professionals, because actually what I teach on the hypnobirthing course is all based on evidence. What the guidelines are that midwives and doctors are basing, actually 80% of those are not based on any form of evidence whatsoever. So it's kind of helping people to see that actually this is the logical, this is the evidence-based, this is the kind of scientific, if we like, look at birth. Yes, there may be tools and techniques that we introduce in the course that might be very different to somebody, like listening to a guided relaxation, for example. So we talk about why those powerful. We do sort of exercises to help understand how effective they can be, so that people understand the value in things. But with everything, the course introduces a range of tools and techniques, and I always say to people, some might not sit right with you, and that's okay. You're going to take the things that really work for you, but the thing that's going to make a real difference to you is going to be the way we're going to explore birth from a very logical, scientific perspective, and that everything we talk about will be backed up by evidence, and high quality evidence as well. And we will talk through everything you're going to be told by the maternity services, and we will talk through what evidence, if any, that is based on, and we will then be able to make empowered, informed decisions. So yeah, it's absolutely not about needing to be super spiritual or alternative or any of the other lovely terms that we hear, but it's actually just about tapping into understanding the logic of it all, and actually what our bodies can do. And yeah, if there's spiritual practices you'd like to bring into that will enhance that even further, incredible, then you're going to have an amazing birth experience, but it's not essential at all.
I mean, obviously, so we're on a podcast now where my listeners, they are all they're looking into alternative ways of living and so on. And I love that for them, I can literally say to them, this is, if any of you are interested or pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant or looking for a doula or looking into hypnobirthing as an alternative way to going into a hospital and dealing with it that way, spiritual, holistic people that are trying to find a better way to live your life, I can highly recommend this.
Yeah.
But if you are not in the slightest bit interested in this, which obviously my listeners not so much perhaps, but maybe
Yeah.
people that you know,
Yeah.
maybe even their partners, who knows, you don't have to be this way to do this. Hypnobirthing, although is an alternative way of dealing with things, it's also something that is completely accessible to everybody. Likewise, a doula is different to a midwife. It is an alternative way as opposed to a medical way, but it is completely available to everyone. And the
Yeah.
thing I loved when I did the hypnobirthing, going in, I was skeptical, like, come on, I mean, like, I believe in everything, but I was skeptical. As I said to you personally in the phone call beforehand, I walked in with my anxiety in my hand and like gave it to this hypnobirthing coach, like, please help me. I don't know what to do with
Yeah.
this. And yeah, my husband was skeptical as well. We didn't know what the word hypnobirthing meant. We didn't know if we were going to be hypnotized. We hypnotized
Yes,
in
because people
October.
freak out. Yeah, well, I'm going to be hypnotized and I'm going to lose all sense of control. And yeah, they have these wild ideas which are so far removed from what it is.
Can't help it, can you? If you don't know and you haven't
Yeah.
checked, immediately your brain just starts going mad, doesn't it? Like, I'm going to make this up. This
Yeah.
is what's going to happen. And you walk in and you don't know what to expect. And you're right. Every coach, every teacher will be different.
Mm-mm.
So mine was, I would say, she was probably like an aging hippie.
Yeah.
She didn't really bring it into the room, but you could feel it on her.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. I actually think it helped her quite a lot to be so calm with people. And you
Mm.
know what? She managed to tap into all sorts within me, within my trauma, within my panic, my fear, my anxiety, and everything.
Mm.
But I loved looking around the room and looking at the other couples and the other dads, especially because, again, the dads are more skeptical than the women, I think. And
Often.
there were couples from all walks of life.
Mm.
Absolutely all walks of life. And I would say out of the whole room, I was probably the most open-minded.
Yeah.
Even though we were all there, we'd all put ourselves there. I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the most, and I looked and thought, that's really incredible, because by the time we were done with this woman, we were all ready to rock it. Do you know what I mean? Like, we were like, yeah, let's go. Like, everyone was really ready for it and prepared. They felt so solid and grounded that, yeah, I hugely advocate hypnobirthing. Best thing I think I ever came across was that.
Yeah, absolutely. My own experience of it, which was, what inspired me to then think, okay, I'm going to train and do this because I want to help other people access this. But yeah, my own experience was I was coming from a place absolutely full of fear and anxiety and thinking, well, how on earth does anyone give birth without pain relief? Because I know it to be really painful because I'd already been in a labour before, and literally felt like I was going to die, and have memories of just screaming constantly to my husband and asking him to save me. And so I came to it with a level of skepticism, I guess, because I was thinking, I can't imagine how I know that reality. I can't imagine how I could get from that to having this sort of really calm, wonderful birth. And I had already employed a doula because I knew I was going to need that extra bit of support. And it was her that had then suggested that perhaps to go and do a hypnobirthing course would be a really good thing. And I sort of went in not really quite knowing what I was going to get, but hopeful that it would help me. And, in particular, she felt it was going to help my fear and anxiety and my previous trauma. And I think really similar experience to yourself. I was just taken on this journey of like, wow, okay, this is possible. And it all just made perfect sense. And again,
As well, like, you're learning about yourself, aren't you? Not just your
yes,
body
yes,
or what you can do or the
yeah,
science behind it. You're also learning about you, as a
yes,
person, how strong you are, and all these things
yes,
you started to doubt because of that first go, and you kind of go,
yeah,
whoa, like, I actually have faith here, like, I'm
yeah,
really
yeah.
feeling this, man.
It's the most empowering experience, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that there were 4 couples on the course that I did. We all stayed in touch afterwards and shared our experiences. And of the 4, one chose for a cesarean because of varying factors, and that was their informed, empowered decision that they were really happy with and had a really positive experience of it. The other 3 all waited for spontaneous labour to begin and had really calm, pretty smooth births, with no pain relief and no medical intervention. Although all, I believe, it did end up birthing in a hospital. I think that was the plan, actually, for certainly most. And I birthed in a hospital. I wouldn't if I was doing it again now. I know even more than I did then, but I did. But all 3 of those that, yeah, we none of us used any pain relief. And I'm not saying that as a sort of, oh wow, how great am I, and I think there can almost be this image as well of like, people are like, well, you don't have to be a hero, so I'm going to take the pain relief. Everyone, my sister told me just take everything because it's hell. And it's like, I'm not saying that to be like, wow, look at me, I'm so strong, and I've had some very close friends actually who I had sort of, one of whom I really sort of supported through her pregnancy and helped her to sort of prepare for her birth. And I'll always remember it stuck in my mind of her saying like, I don't know how you did it. I couldn't do it. I don't know how you did it. And actually, I mean, it would be a whole podcast episode in itself to unpick that particular story and that particular birth. And it all comes down to that, she hadn't had all of that preparation, and she hadn't had, sadly, and I hope, next time one of my friends is preparing for birth, now that I'm accredited to teach this course, and, I'd be able to support them in a very different way. And I would openly invite them and encourage them to come and do the full course with me, because she hadn't had, all of that background that was necessary. She didn't have the right environment that was conducive to it. So I said, of course you can't deal with the pain of labour if you don't have that right environment around you, because there are hormones in our body that are needed for labour to happen smoothly and to make labour more comfortable and bearable for us, that will not function if we're not in the right environment. And so it's sort of,
God,
it's
that all
really,
coming back to me now. Yeah. If we're
Yeah,
stressed and we're tense, it blocks the hormone that actually
blocks
softens everything.
oxytocin.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
This
So
is
the
your thing.
minute that we have any adrenaline in our body, and adrenaline is something that can be spiked so easily. It could be as simple as, you're in your home even birthing, and a midwife who's coming in to support you comes in and starts talking quite loudly and starts trying to engage you in lots of conversation, and that can spike our adrenaline. And the minute we have any adrenaline running through us, oxytocin is completely inhibited. And without oxytocin, our uterus literally can't function as it needs to for labour. And this is why we end up with labours that stall, that then don't progress, that then are told by the hospital that you're just not progressing. So we now need to
Yeah.
put you on a drip of hormones to help it along, or we now need to take you to have a cesarean, or, you've been pushing for too long, so we're now going to need to use forceps to pull your baby out. Well, actually, what's happening there is that the environment is not allowing the hormones that are needed for birth to function. And it's, it's a huge topic, and it's, again, I come back to why we do the course, and it's a long course, and it's, we delve into it over multiple weeks because there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to understand. But yes, I just remember, feeling it's not about, oh, look at me, I'm so great because I didn't use pain relief. It's like, well, actually, look at that example of 3 women that all sat in that course in that same room with that same teacher, and that was the outcome for all of us because we'd been empowered with the knowledge that we needed, because we knew how to create that right environment for us, and because we had birth partners, and doula support in my particular example even better, who knew how to also hold that space for us as well. And without those things, yeah, it's like setting yourself up to fail. You wouldn't run a marathon without intense training and preparation. We can't expect our bodies to be able to do that, and in the same way, we can't expect our bodies to just birth without any sort of preparation and practice and understanding how that process works. 2,000 years ago in a cave, women could do it because they hadn't been conditioned like we have to fear birth and to think that it's complicated. Actually, they would have just done instinctively what, like mammals do today. They would have gone into a dark corner, probably by themselves, maybe with one trusted person, and they would have birthed. And vast majority of the time, that would have been fairly smooth, efficient process. And so we have to prepare. And it's a huge thing that we have to prepare for and practice for. And so, yeah, my advice to anyone would be, if they're considering, or if they know anyone, like you said, who may be less open-minded in their lives that is preparing to have a baby, is, please be open-minded enough to try the course, because I can guarantee that it really will change your perspective, and it teaches us so much about what is possible.
I think it's because there's a scientific aspect to it. So it's not just asking you to take a leap of faith into complete belief in something that you're not interested in. There is actual scientific, like that download of info that just came back. That's probably somewhere way back in my brain.
Yes.
It's not needed
Yeah.
to come forward since I had my daughter 7 years ago. But
Yeah.
the second that you mentioned one word, it just shot forward. And also,
Yes.
I remember it all. I remember them describing the body and the hormones and the
Yeah.
flushing and the go, oh my God. And it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Perfect sense that those things would happen, and that would be the reaction of your body, because it would assume something was the matter and it would go into a scared state, a shock state, and so
Yeah.
on. And that is not conducive to a simple birth.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's no different to anything that we talk about on this podcast, between stress and,
Yeah.
and why we meditate to stop stress so that we don't end up with this
That,
fight and flight.
yeah.
It's a fabulous full circle. And yeah, I mean, my husband, he's a very open-minded man. He really is, but it's not his bag. It's not his cup of tea at all. But he went
Yeah.
to every single session, and we were talking about it only a few days ago when I was saying that you were coming on the podcast. And even he was like waxing lyrical about it. Like, it was the best thing we ever did. What an amazing thing to do. That woman
Yeah.
was incredible. What we learned was so good. Everyone should know how to do this.
Yeah.
And I do feel that it's something very important that people should know. And the doula side of it as well, that supportive, nurturing, caring, guiding, helping you, assisting you, advocating for you side of birth. And I think that, I think what you do is wonderful, actually.
Thank
Very good
you.
for the world, I really do. Very good for the women that are going through this.
Yeah.
As two women that have had, their own share of trauma, I think we
Yeah.
can say that, it's a very good thing to be out there.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, it's been amazing having you on. Honestly, you and I feel like I could write a few more episodes
Yeah.
specifically about specific subjects.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no. Well, hopefully I might come back again because
Oh,
yeah, I
that'd be
think
great.
there's probably 5 podcast episodes between us, isn't there? And
Definitely.
even just within the world of birth, there's so much more we could talk about. But outside of that as well, and some of our similar experiences, outside of that are yeah. So I hope to be back. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. And guys, I'll put all the information for Claire and for Your Birth and Beyond. That's right, isn't it? Yep,
Yes.
for Your Birth
Yeah.
and Beyond. I'll put all the links and everything else in the bio for the podcast so that you can, get in touch. You can just check her stuff out. She's got loads of info on Instagram and so on. So just head over there. But for now, thank you so much for coming on, Claire. It really was an absolute pleasure to listen to you. And to you guys, thank you very much for joining us. And take care of yourselves until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.